Yeah.
So, all right. So it is Saturday. It is Catterday here in Cat World. So we call Saturdays Catterday. So happy Catterday, everybody! And we're going to give you guys a couple minutes to hop on. And thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'm so excited to have Dr. Suter here to chat about how to best keep our pets healthy with her approach with the 7 pillars of health. And we're also going to be answering some questions. So if you have specific questions, feel free to drop those into the chats and we will do our best to answer all of those. Good morning, Michelle. And if you're watching, tell us that you're here and where you guys are watching from. I think it's interesting to see where our audience comes from. So we'd love to say hi back to you. So be sure to drop us a little note there. Um, and you can drop questions in as well. And we'll do our best to keep track of all of those and get them answered as much as we can. So, yeah. So, Dr. Studer, why don't you start by just telling us how did you get into this profession? Did you always want to be a veterinarian? And especially with the holistic approach that you are passionate about, there's always a story behind that. So, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah. Well, hello everyone first. Hi Michelle. I know
And
Michelle.
Annie,
It's good to see you. She's always the first one to show up.
oh, I love that. Thank you.
I love Michelle. She's amazing. But anyways, hi everyone. Yeah, so question, that's a good question. Well, I'm a little weird that way as far as my story goes. And recently I started thinking about how did I really get into into the veterinary world. And I have to admit that as a kid, I didn't really like animals that much. I didn't really have that much of a connection to them. You know, we had a guinea pig, and sure, it was sad when she died.
Hmm.
At the hands of a dog, or
Oh,
paws of a dog, I should say.
yeah,
You know, we had to clean our cage, and it wasn't really that interactive. It just
right.
wasn't my thing. And then my mom decided she wanted a dog, and I'm like, really? Do we have to have a dog? And myself and my dad, we were like, yeah, really? Is that necessary? And it was always my sister who brought in all the animals. And so, recently I thought, how in the world did I become a vet? Why? What really did that? And it was my sister who ended up dragging me to a barn, kicking and screaming. She basically told me, "You need to go spend your Christmas money on lessons, horseback riding lessons." And I'm like, "Okay." After she bugged me for a couple months, I'm like, "Okay, I'll go." So I ended up going and got the bug, basically, and that was it. Oh, hi, Katie.
Katie.
We need to chat. Anyway, so that's sort of how I then got into the animals. But I think that it was more that, my soul is about service. My soul is about beauty, love, care, compassion, support, peace, healing, all of that. And I think it's just that I became a vet because that was one of the, I think, most beautiful ways that we can serve. Because with the animals, there's a direct path into the heart. I mean, when people show up, their hearts are right there. I mean,
Hmm.
they wear them on their sleeves. And I think as veterinarians, or anyone who works in the field with the animals, um, it's like a lot of the barriers are gone. And I don't think that human doctors have that, or dentists, or whomever. They don't have that direct access into people's hearts quite like we do with the animals. And um, I think somehow that's how I ended up becoming a vet, because that, my calling is healing, you
Yeah.
know, no matter who, what, because I feel passionate for healing of humans, the planet, the soil, microbes. I mean, trees. I just had a chat with one of my outdoor trees this morning, a tree that had been there for the entire time that I've lived here. And I never really I saw the tree, but I never really saw the tree because
Mm-hmm.
I didn't take the time.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh, this is a person, you know?
Yeah.
And every time somebody, cuts down a tree, I feel sad, and it kind of hurts on some level. But anyways, so it's really healing everything. And I just basically chose the veterinary hat to do that. And I think it served me really well.
I totally agree. And it's funny. I'm glad you said that about trees because I talk to my trees all the time outside. I've
Mm-hmm.
planted a couple new trees and they're little trees. So I'm like, how you doing today, little tree? Come on, you can grow,
Right, right. And
big and strong. It's just so fun. But
yeah.
you're right. I mean, pet parents, when we go to the vet with our pets, our heart is on our sleeve because those are our kids, our babies, and we love and would do the world anything in the world for them. But when we have to go to a doctor ourselves or a dentist, it's not quite the same thing because we don't want to be there. you know, we're more hesitant and more fearful and afraid. Um, in those kind of situations. So I see how you would have a direct connection to our hearts through the pets. That makes total sense. And
Yeah.
if we can heal the pet and have an influence and have an impact that family on a soul level, it's amazing.
Hmm. Yeah, because people are just much more willing to change something for their animals
Absolutely.
because there's so much in their hearts and so connected, um and that's the beauty of it, really.
No, it's true. And do you find in your practice, because I know I find this a lot in mine, is a lot of times the pets will have a condition or something going on with their behavior or their illness, and they're really trying to reflect back to the parent, like, hello, you have this problem. And
Hmm.
maybe they don't even realize that they have that problem at the moment, but then they'll find out that they'll go in for blood work or whatever and they realize, oh my god, I have diabetes, my cat has diabetes, or I have cancer, my cat has cancer. That's so weird that we and the cat's like, yeah, I've been trying to tell you. I've been trying to show you that, or reflect back their emotional stuff that they're taking on. Do you see that a lot in your practice and your observation?
Yeah, certainly. I have people say, oh yeah, I have IBD too. But maybe I see it even more reflected in the emotional, mental aspect, behavior.
Yes.
And maybe it's because I'm just paying more attention to that on some level. Because even when I communicate with animals, for me, the communication is more the emotional, mental aspect of things, not so much details. Like if somebody asked me what's my dog's favorite toy, I'm like, well, I don't know. you know,
Exactly.
um, so maybe it's more that. Where was I going with that now? Brain. I guess,
Connection.
the brain kind of
Yeah.
disappears when you drop into the heart. It's like,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. It's
yeah. So maybe more on that level, because for me, I think some of the biggest change really comes on the emotional realization, awakening, expanding level. And
yeah.
that's probably where my focus is a little bit more. I'm also somebody who doesn't beat around the bush. I'm also a really horrible storyteller as a result, because I go right to the point and there's no embellishment or anything like that. It just goes right to it. Um, so I guess I see that more on that level, because people come in with a lot of anxiety, a lot of
Yeah.
stress, a lot of whatever it may be, and that's usually what I pick up from the animals as well, and that's then what I work with more so, I guess,
Mhm.
with my people, because that's where I find I get the most relief, I guess, for people, kind of relaxing, because again, with the animals, we get so worried about them and so afraid that we may lose our hearts, because if they die, part of our hearts kind of dies
Yeah.
with them on some level. And so if I can help people go back into their drop into their hearts and find a little bit of peace, then the animals can relax as well. And that's also mostly what I get from the animals. It's like, everything's okay. I'm okay. Worry less, just play with me, be with me, connect.
Connect. Be present in the moment. Yep.
Yeah.
So true. Well, that's beautiful. So let's dive into your 7 pillars, and then you guys can drop questions in as we go too, and we're happy to stop and answer those. But yeah, I would love to hear your 7-pillar approach. This is going to be cool.
Yeah. So how I got to it, I guess, is a story. As usual.
People remember.
I tried a bunch of different things, and that's what worked.
Exactly.
Okay, so that was what, like 10 words? But anyways, I myself had a lot of chronic issues, even though I grew up eating pretty healthy and growing up rather healthy, but my mom was not the healthiest person in the world, probably constitutionally, because it gets passed down from one generation to another. So in any case, I already didn't get the best constitution in the world. And so I had some chronic issues, like chronic fatigue, which basically kept me sofa bound for nearly a decade, which was, very painful. I mean, I didn't have physical pain in the sense that I needed pain medication or anything like that, but just the feeling of dying, for 10 years was kind of not very fun and limiting. But in any case, it led me to exploring a lot of different things. And I tried a little bit of this, I tried a little bit of that, and I gave it a good try. I did acupuncture and Chinese herbs for at least 2 years or longer.
Right.
I worked on my own emotional, mental, spiritual things. But I did everything separately, basically. And I think that was, obviously I got to exploring a lot of things, but nothing really worked in the way that I wanted to. And long story short, I ended up getting out of that chronic fatigue thing because I ended up putting the pieces together in the end. And then a few years later, I got stepped on by a pony. I did something to it I didn't like, and it knocked me over as a result. Nasty little booger.
Oops.
Yeah, anyways, I guess I had it coming. But in any case, I ended up with a slipped disc that caused me a lot of pain, like radiating nerve pain down my arms, which, I ended up in the ER a couple of times because it was just so excruciatingly painful. And my doctor put me on some autoimmune, on some pain medication, and that then triggered an autoimmune reaction. So I ended up with having pain in the joints and the tendons, and I could barely squeeze a sponge because my hands were hurting so much. So in any case, at that point, I had figured out the pillars of health that needed to be put together, and so it only took about 2 years for me to get out of that autoimmune thing. I'm completely cured. I have zero autoimmune anything left. I had it tested. I haven't had any sort of reoccurrence in the last 7 years.
Wow.
So I basically got out of that. But anyways, that whole journey really got me to the point to realize that in order to heal, you have to have a system.
Yeah.
You have to have all of these different pieces in place for the body to work. And especially for our animals, we need shortcuts. We don't have 10 years to fiddle around like I did, because 10 years from now, your animal's definitely going to be dead. So that's how I came up with these 7 pillars. And it's not unique to me. Other people are using the pillars of health. Katie Woodley is one of them as well. And it's, I took it from the human field and just kind of adjusted it a little bit. But basically, pillar number 1 is nutrition. Without providing the cells what they need to be able to function properly, they can't. It's like trying to build a house out of cardboard. Good luck, especially in Chicago. Either it rains, it's freezing, so you'll freeze to death, or the wind is going to blow it away. So, anyways, you can't have a healthy body without the cells getting what they need. And um, actually, I guess I should backtrack just a little bit, because um, disease results from two causes. One is the deficiency of something, so the cells not getting what they need to function properly, or an excess or toxicity.
Right.
So these two things actually then make the cells malfunction, basically. So if the cells are malfunctioning, if you have enough cells that are malfunctioning, you end up with symptoms and disease. So if it's the pancreatic cells that are malfunctioning, then you may end up with diabetes or pancreatitis or whatever it may be. Or if the GI cells are malfunctioning, then you have different issues. Or the brain cells are malfunctioning, then you have brain issues, behavior issues. So basically, we have malfunctioning cells. So in order to restore that function of these cells, we need these 7 pillars of health. And one of these pillars is, as I mentioned, nutrition. The other pillar is gastrointestinal health, because even Hippocrates, who lived 400 years, BC, he knew that most disease actually is originating from the gastrointestinal tract. And that makes sense, because that's where all the food goes in. That's where we can also have a lot of inflammation originating if we have leaky gut. That's where the microbiome is, with the gazillion microbes that are basically running the show. They do everything. 95% of all metabolic processes are actually originating in the microbes, and they create all of these good nutrients for the body to absorb. They help digestion. I mean, they do everything. And with the war on microbes that we have going, that's completely the wrong approach to health. We have to get away from that entirely, because that is not supporting anybody.
No.
So gastrointestinal health, microbial health, having diversity in the microbiome, that is absolutely crucial, because these microbes are really running the show. And to quote Raphael Kalman, I think that's his name. Yeah, he's a human doctor. He says that we're just a heap of microbes dressed up in a suit.
That's true.
For our animals as well, especially the animals that don't go outside or only walk in the same neighborhood where glyphosate has been sprayed. There are no microbes. It's devoid of microbes. So they need to have a lot of exposure to different microbes. And, you mentioned earlier when we chatted before we got on about airports, and that's the perfect place to get a lot of diversity. You may not necessarily get the microbes that are the most beneficial and such, but go into a bathroom and sit in a bathroom for a little while, you're going to have so many microbes from all over the place. And especially in the airport, there are people coming from everywhere.
Yes.
I guess the international terminal would probably be even better than the regular one. Now I'm thinking about it. But anyways, that's one place where you get a lot of microbial diversity is in bathrooms, because every time you flush, there's like a cloud of microbes that floats around. But in any case, off the gross subject here. But yeah, microbial diversity is crucial for the gastrointestinal health. So that's the two foundational pillars of health. Without those two, you can't really I just saw Katie's yeah, she's in as well, so but anyway, so those are the foundational pieces. The bottom two that I start with, because without gastrointestinal health and good nutrition, I don't continue on with the others, especially the detox pillar, because the body needs to have all the nutrients necessary in order for the detox pathways to work. And so doing detox without also making sure that the detox pathways are working, that can make an animal much more sick. So foundational, nutrition and gastrointestinal health already does a lot for detoxification. It provides the body with what it needs to do its job, including the liver and the kidneys. So that's important. But certainly then there's a lot that we can do on a detox level by decreasing the exposure to toxins, and especially in cats, that's incredibly crucial because cats, I hate them as patients. I have to be really honest because they never do what I tell them to do. They're like, I'm not taking that. Forget it. Even with your best intentions, most of them are just really challenging. I love cats, obviously, but certainly they tend to not be very
Yes,
cooperative.
they're very independent thinkers.
Exactly. So you have to sort of start early with them, and I think for cats, prevention is probably your best bet. Because that way you don't have to then start treating, because again, they don't really appreciate that very much most of the time. So definitely removing all of the toxins out of the environment as much as you can is really important. And that includes, fire retardants on your furniture. So if you're getting new furniture, make sure that it doesn't come loaded with a bunch of chemicals. Because part of my chronic fatigue journey was that I had moved into an apartment. They had replaced the carpet. They had painted the walls. I had bought a new sofa and the new bed. So I was basically in this soup of chemicals. And because I couldn't move, I stayed in that soup of chemicals because I was so exhausted all the time.
Right.
So that obviously that was not a good idea. But for our cats, it's even more important because they lick themselves. I mean, they're such clean freaks. They lick everything that gets onto their body. So although cats are not big fans of being washed, I think even just taking a damp cloth and getting it over their bodies and helping them can also decrease the amount of toxins that they take into their systems, but certainly limiting them by eliminating the toxic chemicals that you use in the house, not spraying your yard as much as you can. Obviously, if you have a neighbor who sprays, it's good to get on them too, but.
Yeah, I have to share something with you. So last week, I was doing some testing on myself, muscle testing and energy testing, some stuff that I was working on for me. And formaldehyde and ethyl something came up, and it basically, formaldehyde was a derivative of this other thing, and I can't remember the word. I'm like, where in the heck would I be exposed to that? It's something in my house. And so I was just racking my brain. It's the flooring, because I think I'm in a leased house. It's not mine, but it's like a laminate flooring and in carpets, So I was testing, like, okay, where am I being exposed to? And it was the flooring. So basically now I'm doing a detox, but I was thinking, okay, if I'm being exposed to this, I know my cats are, so now they're on a detox for formaldehyde stuff. You're right. We can't see it, but it's in our sofas and our carpets and our
the walls. I mean, all wood,
everything
with formaldehyde.
So it's just something to consider, and this is why I am such a big fan of humans detoxing several times a year, because you just don't know what you're being exposed to. You can't see it.
Right. And we have over 80,000 new chemicals that have come on the market since World War II. Most of them have never been tested for. We've gone from like 1 million kilograms 1 million kilograms of chemicals being sprayed around to, I can't remember, it was in the billions. I mean, since the 1940s or something like that. And the problem is that the liver, the liver is basically made to detoxify the waste from the cells. But now we have all of these chemicals, and the liver is like, I don't recognize those.
Right.
I'm not really trained to see them as toxins, so they kind of sit there and do damage. And then, the cells are like, well, I think, or the immune system is like, Well, I think that cell looks a little unhealthy. Let me go attack it. And that's how we end up with autoimmune disease, because the body is trying to
Get rid of stuff.
immune system is trying to get rid of these cells.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it may happen to be the kidney cells. And what do we have in cats? We have a lot of kidney disease because these cells are being damaged and they don't regenerate very well. So kidney cells are definitely taking the brunt of it. And then for cats, also the thyroid starts to kind of proliferate wildly.
Yeah.
So anyways, toxins, but we also have to look at other toxins like mold. A lot of houses have mold, and these toxins are present, and the cats will take them in as well. And that then can also decrease the function of the liver and the kidneys and so on. And then obviously glyphosate, which basically just shuts down liver pathways. So the liver can't really do its job. And then we also can't forget some of the other invisible toxins, such as electromagnetic radiation. And I know that's a sore spot for everybody. Everybody has an excuse. Oh, I can't live without, and my husband or whatever partner isn't into it. And I know it can turn into a big fight, but we do have to address it as well. Because, for example, Wi-Fi can increase mold toxicity tremendously. I think it's by a factor of 1,000 or more, even, because the mold gets stimulated by the Wi-Fi because it wants to survive. And what does mold do when it tries to survive? Well, it creates more toxins so that it can't be killed. So yeah, definitely huge part, and decreasing as much as we possibly can is obviously very important with cats, because again, they're not huge fans of whatever you're trying to do to them. So limiting exposure is really, really important. But that goes for us humans and I mean, for everybody really. And we are living on a planet that's very polluted right now, and we all need to contribute to changing that, because we only have 60 years of farmable soil left. And one application of roundworm of Roundup kills 50% of earthworms, not to mention all the microbes that are getting killed in the process. So we definitely need to change. But you know, it's all good because we're now basically pinned against the wall, and our animals are the ones that are helping with that pinning, because they're showing how bad it is. And so many people now during this pandemic have gotten more animals, and they're seeing the damage, and so it's really changing things. And we humans, we need to have a sufficient amount of pain to change, because no pain, no gain.
They're not willing to change until they reach the precipice. So
yeah, exactly. And you know, oftentimes we just don't see it until it hits us in the face. You know, it's like with me, with that pony that stepped on my shoulders, because I had to learn in the process that pain medication is a really good thing. You know, if you're hurting like that, you want something. So I got my piece of humble pie then that I wasn't as aware of, you know. So it's
exactly.
Humans and change, that's like a swear word. It's the C word.
I know, it's true. We have a really good question from Delft Blue. He says, in view of all the chemicals in their environment, are indoor-only cats, which we are constantly told is best for them, more at risk of disease than a cat allowed to go outside in fresh air?
Well, I'm a big proponent of cats going outside. And I was so shocked about 10 years ago when I read something from PETA where they said it's considered cruelty to let cats go outside. I'm like, what? It's just, that can't be. I think, you know, cats love to be outside. Obviously, it's a big controversy, you know, when you have a busy road and such. But you know, I've also seen cats survive just fine next to a busy road, because somehow they learn not to step in front of a car. And I know that may not make me very popular, but personally, I would rather have a cat that's outdoors and gets, you know, run over by a car, but had a good life, had a life that well, my opinion, my personal feeling, because I grew up with cats that were outdoors, is that they are happy being outdoor cats, you know, in and out. Um, and personally, and I don't have a cat right now, I feel like I would, if I had a cat, I would want it to be outside. And I would rather have it eaten by a coyote or run over by a car than being stuck inside and being unhappy. But at the same time, I also know that a lot of cats are really happy indoors, and there's so much that we can do for them as well to make it great. So what I'm saying, what I just said, is just more of my personal feeling, and I'm not trying to offend anyone or make anyone feel bad. But
Right.
even behaviorists, I just read an article recently. They are saying that some of the diseases that cats get are contributed by the fact that they're not going outside. And those were conventional people, conventional vets that wrote that. So if at all possible, and I'm sure you probably talked about environmental enrichment with a lot of other people. And there's a lot we can do, especially if you have a little backyard. You can create a catio. Just be really creative. That's what I love about Kate Benjamin and Jackson's Galaxy and it's like there's so many things that we can do for cats, because I think one of the big issues with cats is that they are so sensitive to stress. Pick up on our stress, and especially when they're stressed, it's so really amazing.
No, absolutely.
That. Plus, they love touching the ground, especially, the orange cats. They have such earthy names, most of them, and they just love to have their paws on the ground. So if there's any way that you can do that, and yes, Michelle mentioned harness, walking, catios are good options. I think wasn't there like a summit recently of people with cats that take them on hikes and stuff like that? I can't remember what that was all about, but it was really amazing.
Yeah.
But you have to do it, starting early in life, because obviously if you have a cat that only grew up inside, they may not be all that happy going outside because that's all they know.
Right.
But there's certainly a lot you can do inside for them. So anyways, there's no generalizing. And
I think you have to honor that each cat as an individual and their personality and where they feel comfortable. And like you said, just provide as many options as you're able to do, with keeping in mind what are the risks versus rewards. How safe would they be in an outdoor environment without supervision if you let them out? If you are next to a huge busy highway, probably you would be less likely to want to let them outside than if you lived in a nice quiet neighborhood with huge lots in the country or whatever, and there was not much traffic, and there was a lot more sense of safety involved for them.
And everybody is different too of what they can handle. And I also think that animals are here for us mostly because we humans have a bit of we're a little challenged with the big brain, so they keep us grounded. So every cat also has a different purpose.
Absolutely.
Of what they're here for and what they're showing us. And for some people it may be that they have stress UTIs all the time because they're reflecting the stress that the humans are under and helping that way. So
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I see that so much in my work. We have to remember that cats are on their own spiritual journey just like we are. And they do have a purpose for being in our lives, and they can be our biggest teachers if we open our eyes and bring our awareness to understand and learn what it is they're trying to teach us or show us. But they do see their role as being in our lives for a reason. And so it's just really cool when you can make that connection. Like you've obviously seen, it's fascinating. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, and I think, that would be one of the pillars, the emotional and mental health. of course, it's also about mental health and emotional health of the animals, but that pillar is actually more about the humans because, again, of that reflection, they are putting a mirror in front of our noses. And so instead of fretting so much about them being sick, obviously we need to take care of them when they're sick. I'm not saying that, but like, what are they showing me? And one good example is, my neighbors, they have 4 cats and they're indoor outdoor cats. And one of them is very friendly and he shows up at my place. But recently, every time he shows up, he marks. And I'm like, excuse me, out you go. But what does that mean? That's just one thing to look at. And I had talked to Dr. Susan Wagner. She does a lot of that work. And she had mentioned in one of the other pet summits that she was on, well, if an animal is marking, you have to ask, well, who's pissing on you all the time? So I'm like, who's pissing on me? And then I realized, oh, that's what I'm doing. I'm constantly putting myself down. I'm not doing enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not whatever enough. I should work more. I should, it's like, yeah. So anyway, so when an animal is doing something like that, it's or anything, it's really worth looking at what are we doing to ourselves, or how is that a reflection of our own life, rather than only focusing on the animal, because that will certainly create a lot of relief. For example, if you have 2 cats that are fighting constantly, well, who are you fighting with constantly in your life? Where's that coming from? And taking the attention completely off the animals and just looking in your life, and then see what happens with the animals.
Yes.
Are they changing? Because oftentimes they're reflecting. I mean, I see it all the time. People come in with their animals and they're totally stressed out, anxious, talk a mile a minute, can't get them to calm down or be quiet. Even some people, I tell them, look, let's just take a deep breath. They keep talking. No, I really mean it. Let's just be quiet for just a few seconds and take a deep breath. And this is one of the hardest things for people to do. And I see the animals are completely stressed out too when they're coming in anxious and can barely touch them, So that aspect, we need to work on ourselves. I think that's really important. And that's, one of the pillars is that mental emotional health that is for both our animals and us, certainly.
Totally agree.
Yeah. And then one of the other pillars is fitness and exercise, because that helps a lot with that mental and emotional health. And, we talked about outdoor, indoor, and that sort of thing. But physical movement is absolutely crucial, essential, vital. I had a bunch of adjectives for that at one point or another, but it's so undervalued.
It is.
Again, because we don't have time, but we do need to make time for exercise, because that helps everything.
It really does.
It's probably one of the most important pillars of health. And when I had my own, health issues, I didn't really exercise a whole lot. I mean, I was much more of an ingrained couch potato, really, by nature. Even as a kid, I'd be sitting on my bed reading instead of moving. But if I have one regret in life, it would be that I didn't move enough. And obviously I am now moving more, not nearly as much as I'd like to, but it's so crucial for our animals, because it improves blood flow and improves hormonal health. It improves mental health. It improves the microbiome, because movement also stimulates the it has a good effect on the gastrointestinal tract.
Yes.
And the biome. nutrition is taken in better, cells work better because there's more energy, there's more oxygen. Oxygen is great for all the cells. They love that. Cancer cells don't really survive very well in an environment that's rich in oxygen. That's why, the Keto Pet Sanctuary, they their part of their program was vigorous exercise. Obviously, you have to adjust it to what the animal's capacity is, and don't, after this, take your cat and make it exercise for 30 minutes when it hasn't done anything, especially when they're overweight and have arthritis and that sort of thing. So you have to be smart about that. But that's really important to make sure that they exercise, and they can go up and down, because if they don't exercise sufficiently, they will end up with arthritic changes. I mean, that's pretty much a given. So starting early with that and keeping up with that is incredibly important for all animals, really.
Absolutely. Even older cats, I mean, they don't have to be as active.
Right.
Getting them moving around a little bit more and just not sleeping all day, and engaging them with play on a level that they can. It's also very great.
Yeah. And if you have a young cat, like a kitten, get them used to traveling. Get them used to going places, even if you don't have a yard. As Michelle mentioned earlier, get them used to a harness, travel with them, get them used to the carrier, and go places, because that gives them a lot of mental stimulation. And the sooner, I mean, with cats, anything that you potentially will have to do with them down the road, you want to train that when they're kittens, including giving them pills, putting things in their mouths, brushing their teeth, having them in carriers, having them travel, harness. Yeah. What am I missing?
Toenails, trimming their nails.
Toenails, looking in their ears, sticking things up their butts, whatever they may need, you have to start early. Feeding them different types of foods so that they're used to different consistencies of things. With cats, again, start right away as soon as you get a kitten. And I know most people, they wait until something happens, but with cats, it's even more important to be very, very proactive from the very beginning. And I know it's a little bit more work, but it'll pay off down the road for sure.
Laura Lee has a question. She says, we had the 2 foundation pillars really good, but the emotional pillar crashed hard. So how do we get the 2 foundational pillars back to where they need to be? I guess you're talking about the nutrition and the gastrointestinal, I think, Laura Lee, correct? So if you can answer that. And then Tony says, why are so many cats diagnosed with hyperthyroidism? Is there something we can change?
It's toxins. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly, we can obviously provide them with an environment that's less toxic, but we do live in a toxic environment. I mean, that's where the change on a global level has to happen.
Yeah.
And that's, voting with your money. Don't buy strawberries from Chile in the middle of the winter, where they have to, ship them all the way. They come in a plastic container. So, shop locally, grow your own food, eat what's in season. Don't use chemicals, drive the least amount you have to. I mean, there's so many things that need to happen on a global level. Filter your water.
Detox. Just several times a year, put your cat through detox.
Yeah. But we need to fix the root cause. We need to eliminate the toxins.
Yeah.
And money is the best way to do that, because if you don't buy stuff that is polluting the environment, then that's really amazing.
Yeah.
And there's a website, the Environmental Working Group, where you can look up things to see how many toxins are in there. But there's also a website where you can check out your carbon, your water footprint, which was quite interesting. I entered all of that to see how much water I'm actually using. And I thought that it would be because I like to once in a while take a long shower, that it would actually be the household water that would be the most. And I even included my landlord's pool because I use the pool, but most of it was from shopping, water footprint, shopping and food.
Interesting.
Because of how much water is necessary there. So just becoming more aware of these things, and supporting those people who are working on regenerating our soils and growing things in a way that is supporting the planet. And I know that costs a little bit more, oftentimes, but that's what we need, because otherwise there's going to be no life left on this planet. So in order to really address all these cats with hyperthyroidism is to, fix the environment, because that's where the power is. And then as far as the two foundation pillars, I'd have to know how that emotional crash showed up in the body, because if it's IBD, it would have to be addressed differently than if it was diabetes or something else. So I guess without knowing more, it's a little bit hard to answer that question, I guess.
Laura Lee, I can get with you privately and go into more detail. I have some ideas on that one.
Okay. I mean, if you have anything to share, I'm more than happy to address it. But
well, here's what I've seen with cats, because I've had this experience with my own cats from time to time, and it goes a little deep, so bear with me. So when you're talking about a food that is super healthy, like a raw food, that's a living, it hasn't been processed, it's full of enzymes, it's considered living. Okay. It's on a high vibrational frequency compared to a dead food, like a processed food, very low vibrational frequency. When a cat emotionally goes from being very happy and healthy to suddenly, having a horrible emotional trauma, their vibrational frequency drops so low. I'm guessing, this is a theory I'm working on. They used to eat raw, but now that's like they can't stomach the raw. And I have a feeling it has to do with their vibrational frequency, because it just doesn't resonate for them, because they're not up here anymore. They can go to a canned food, which is still, it's not a living food, it's a processed food. That vibrational frequency is lower than a raw food. If we can get the cat's vibrational frequency back up to where it's a freeze-dried or a raw level, then they're like, oh, okay, I can do that now. It resonates with them once again. That's what I see happening with a lot of the clients, plus my cats, whenever they have issues. It's like they have a mental block, a taste bud block to raw, even though they used to eat it. But then when I do some energy work and clear some stressors, they eat it again. No problem. Don't even think about it, because their vibrational frequency is up here again instead of way down here and so low. And that is the only thing I have been able to piece together to make sense of the whole thing. Because Laura Lee, I understand where you're coming from. And I have been wondering about this for several years, because when I can do the clearing work and clear the stressors and the proteins associated with the taste buds and the gustatory centers of the brain, and clear that energetic frequency that's been stressed and the body looks at it as bad because they had an emotional experience that imprinted on something negative, releasing that as a stressor, all of a sudden you clear all that negative energy surrounding that food, and the body goes, oh, I can eat that. That's no problem. That's the only thing I can come up with. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think that is still probably a little too limited of an interpretation, if I may say so.
I'm sure it is.
Because I think that you're also I would just, well, I know that you're also working with the people at the same time, because you're bringing in your energy and your healing frequency, and that then changes people, and then that changes the animals. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because sometimes we need a little bit of an outside things to kind of get our energy back to where it needs to be. So for example, if I'm down, I have somebody I talk to, and they usually kind of, I feel better afterwards.
Yeah.
And things work better just because I was able to get whatever off my chest. And that's the beauty as a veterinarian, or anybody who's working with animals, like yourself, for example. You bring that new energy in, and you basically provide support, because in the end, it's the lack of perceived support that causes disease. The lack of perceived
disease that creates the disease.
Yeah. Because I had I did some shamanic training way back when, and one of those, the teachers I had at the time, she said that the only thing that heals is love. And when you're coming in as somebody on the outside, you're bringing in a completely different vibration, one of love, one of healing, whatever your own vibration is. Everybody has their own little, special energy, I guess.
Yeah.
And you're bringing that in. You're basically changing the dynamics of the entire social structure, because energy is not just stuck to one thing. It really emanates. And that's probably part of it, that because you're helping and people trust you, they can also let go of some of their stuff, and then the animals go, oh, phew, some weight was lifted. And then things can change quickly. And that, again, that's the beauty of working with animals, because we can create such change, and we can love people in a way, and provide them with that love that they're craving as well, and we all crave that love. We all love love.
No, it's true. Maybe we need to have more love focused energy work for humans.
Well, I think
for ourselves. So if we can get
for ourselves,
and truly love from within, that permeates into everything around us and everything in our lives, and it does raise the vibration.
Yeah,
it is within all of us. We just have to learn how to tap into that.
Yeah, exactly. And you're helping them with that, because you're on the outside, you're not in the middle of it, so you're just bringing a different energy vibration into it, and then all these little pieces and parts just kind of start rearranging themselves, and everything feels better, including the humans.
Yeah, totally. Totally does. We had another question in here. Natalie says, do you feel raw is best for cats? What is in your toolbox for balancing the biome?
Can I maybe just add the last two pillars before we go into that?
Absolutely.
So one of the pillars is hormones, which and the other one is the nervous system. And I'm going to just lump the two together right now, just to make it a little shorter. But one, the nervous system is basically communication from a nervous system, like the nervous system, they send electrical signals. I mean, that's how the information goes from the brain through the nerves to wherever it needs to go, and back up that way as well. Hormones are also signaling things. They also contribute to communication in the body, but on a biochemical level. So these communication systems have to work really well in order for the cells to know what they're supposed to do. And the biome, again, also sends a lot of signaling that way. And there's a whole lot more on an energetic quantum physics level, which we sort of addressed a little bit with what we just talked about the energy healing and all that. But communication is crucial in the body, because if communication fails, then, well, that cell is going to do one thing and the other cell is going to do something completely different that has nothing to do with, is not coherent. They don't work together. And again, Wi-Fi, electromagnetic radiation, all of that also affects that whole communication. So those are just the other two pillars that I wanted to briefly mention, that are crucial to address. Because again, if communication isn't there, if a cat, it has too much hormones or not enough hormones, then it doesn't work. If the nervous system is blocked, it doesn't work well either. For example, I just worked on my sister's cat who had diarrhea for about 3 weeks and horrible smelling and stuff. And I was visiting and I'm like, I got to do something here because I don't want to have that smell around me. But anyways, there was definitely some issues with the innervation of the gastrointestinal tract, and mostly autonomic nervous system, sympathetic parasympathetic imbalance. So I worked on him briefly, because he's one of those who's like, yeah, don't touch me. You can pet me and everything, but as soon as I'm trying to do something else, he's like, yeah, no, I'm out of here. But anyways, the next day he didn't poop at all. And we went to bed and like, oh my God, he's going to poop in the middle of the night and somebody's going to have to get up and clean it up because it's going to be so stinky. Thankfully, he didn't. Although the nightmares, in the middle of the night, I'm like,
yeah, right.
I smell something. But in any case, just working on his nervous system actually then started to resolve that diarrhea. So he didn't poop the next day, and then the next poop he had was still smelly, but it was much more formed already, and I haven't heard back yet. I gotta find out what happened. But in any case, there's little things that we can do just by tweaking the nervous system to make it work better. So anyways, don't know where I was going with that. So what was the question again?
How do you feel about raw food for cats? Is it the best? And then what is in your toolbox for balancing the microbiome?
So definitely raw. Well, I always say that the closest you can feed them to what they would eat in nature, the healthier they can be. Because the body's physiology is made to process what they would eat in the wild. And just because we've had a little bit of kibble for 100 years or so doesn't mean that they've adapted to it. They have not. But that said, if you have a cat that won't eat, if you're not feeding them kibble, it will die. Because that's how cats are. They're like, I'd rather die than eat that. So definitely they have to eat, but certainly if you can get your cats to eat raw, that would certainly be the best way to do that. And sometimes, and that was a question that came up on my Facebook page after I posted that we're doing this. What do you do with cats that don't want to eat that? Well, you have to sort of, take at least a few months to try. And just start extremely slowly. So what I usually recommend is, buy a can of food, scrape off a little bit, put like, a microscopic amount of that canned food on that kibble that they are eating, and put the rest of the can in the freezer, and then just scrape off a little bit with a knife every day. And that way you're not wasting it, because cats, it's like, you serve them like a bunch of stuff and they're like, yeah, no, I'm not eating that. And $500 later, you still have a cat who's not eating it. So just very slowly, but you have to be patient, and it can take up to a year for them to end up eating what you would like them to eat. So with cats, you have to be extremely patient, and they always have to eat because they can get really sick if they don't. But anyway, so raw would certainly be better. To balance out the microbiome, I'm a big fan of doing fecal transplants. And there are two ways of doing that. One is to do it rectally, And then the other one is to do it orally with fecal capsules. Obviously, if you do it with fecal capsules, you can just buy them yourself. You don't have to have a vet for that. If you want to do it rectally, obviously you have to have a vet who can do it. I mean, any vet can do it. It's not rocket science.
Right.
It's just whether your cat is going to tolerate it or not. And with cats, I found it a little bit more challenging to do it rectally because some of them, they will just poop it right back out. So.
And then are there specific conditions that a cat would need to be a good candidate for that? Like, you wouldn't want to just go do a fecal transplant on a cat that just had, mild allergies or anything like that or whatever. But if there was like an
I would actually.
Okay.
There's no such thing as mild allergies.
Okay.
Well, there's a thing as a mild allergy, but it's a big problem.
Okay.
Any allergy, mild or not, is a huge problem.
Okay.
Because it means the immune system is out of balance.
Right.
When the immune system is out of balance, that's a big deal. So yeah, any skin issues. I mean, basically, if people will let me, I will do a fecal transplant on every dog or cat.
Oh, wow. Well, that's awesome to know.
Because the microbiome for people who don't know what the microbiome is, it's basically the assortment of microbes that we have living in and around our bodies. And they outnumber the body's cells by a factor of 10. And from a genetic perspective, they outnumber the body by a factor of 150. So they run the show, basically. They make up, they're responsible for 95% of all metabolic processes in the body. So if we can give an animal a good boost with the microbiome, you're way ahead of the curve already.
Interesting.
Because they're responsible for everything. The body does not function well at all without good microbes. So, and that can look any number of ways, and sometimes you don't even see it, because I have tested animals microbiome because people just were curious, and they had a horrible microbiome, but no symptoms. So then I would still work on fixing that, because maybe they're not showing anything now, but what about in 10 years?
Exactly.
If you have a bad microbiome for 10 years, what will that do to the body?
Right.
So yeah. And then testing, I like to also test the microbiome just to see where I'm at with that, and how much they need, and if they need more, that sort of thing. But I think nowadays everybody can benefit from a fecal transplant, humans included. But it's a matter of finding a good donor.
Right.
Challenge, because I used to have a fecal donor for my dogs, for my dog patients, and he ended up passing away, unfortunately. Well, he was a bit older already, but I haven't been able to find a donor, locally, that I would that I would even start testing to see if he could be a donor. Because all these puppies that are coming, they already have issues,
Yeah, they do.
I'm like, they're, at least I don't see any completely healthy animals anymore, which is really sad.
Totally understand. Yeah, somebody made a comment to me the other day that said, the only healthy cat is one that doesn't go to the vet every year, because they're not jammed with, unnecessary flea and tick meds and heartworm pills and vaccines and everything else. And I'm like, you have a point. They're not being exposed to stuff that make them unhealthy. So that's a big part of the problem.
Yeah, well, but the thing is, we are all so exposed to a lot of things, no matter how well you're doing for your animals, because I do see, I have clients who come in and they do everything right. But their animals are still sickly and not doing well, so, and that's the sad thing, and that's the depressing part, because again, when I was sick, I was doing everything right, and it still was challenging.
Yeah. So that's when it's probably something that you're not seeing. It's probably something you can't see that's being instrumental in or detrimental to your health or your pet's health. Because if you're doing everything right and there's still something that's really off, then you're probably looking at the environmental toxins and the chemicals around you, the soup, the air that you're breathing, and things like that that you just don't see. They're not being
Well, and also,
water.
Taking it even bigger, it's a journey. Life is a journey, and so whatever shows up is just something that we can learn from, grow from, and all of that. So, even if you do everything right, that's like this, perfectionist mindset that I certainly subscribe to. And I'm trying to unsubscribe from. But, we humans, I mean, that's just part of our survival mode. But life is not perfect. And I think that in the end, peace comes from allowing that imperfection to be there, and finding peace with things just the way they are, and I'm not saying we shouldn't be doing things, it's not about just sitting there and
Yeah.
You still need to take on steps in life and do things, but peace comes from accepting things just the way they are, and not necessarily labeling them as good or bad,
right,
as positive or negative, because again, that kind of creates that split and that disconnect. So it's really important to find peace, and for me, a big part, and I talked about that in my group the other day. My neighbors, my landlords insist on spraying for mosquitoes, and every time they show up, I go into complete panic mode.
Yes.
Which is, awful, but I need to learn to make peace with that, because we live in a world that's not perfect. We live in a world where everybody has a chance to learn and grow and play and experiment, and I think we're humans are big experimenters, and then we see what happens, and then we have to experiment in a different way if we didn't like the outcome of that. But I think, allowance, acceptance, finding peace with
and
that.
I think you made a good point though about just giving up the control, because it's not in our control. And when you can sit back and you can say, okay, you know what, it's out of my control, but I've done this, I've done my very best. At the end of the day, your pet may have cancer, for example, and you've done everything you can. At the end of the day, from what I've learned from my teachers, that pet has its own journey, and it has its own pathway to be here, and it knows how long it's going to be here and when it's going to leave and on what terms and all of that. So at the end of the day, we can't look back and blame ourselves because we didn't do enough, we didn't try enough, we didn't act fast enough, or whatever. You have to trust that you were put on this path in this journey, and it happened the way it was meant to happen. And we have to look back and learn the lessons and take those lessons from that experience and try again the next time and do better. And understand that that pet doesn't hold any ill will or, disappointment, or, it's not going to withhold any love from you when he's transitioning over. He's going to love you just as much as he did, and he will continue to love you and be connected with you after his transition. And they never hold resentment. They always love us unconditionally.
Yeah.
And, I think, and if we can just take that responsibility or guilt off of ourselves as pet parents, you are free. You're not burdened. You're not living in under a blanket of guilt and worry. You have to let go at some point and just look at it from a 70,000 foot view perspective instead of myopic, like right on top of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And oftentimes we just need a little extra love that way. And that's why I always make a point of connecting with the people, with my clients, if one of their animals passes, because I know a lot of them are suffering greatly because they euthanize the animal, and then they feel bad because maybe it wasn't the time and they didn't want to play God, and whatever it may be. So just with a few kind words, that can completely shift their experience. But at the same time, when we do have feelings of guilt or something that's nagging, it means that there's just something underneath that we have the opportunity to explore.
Totally agree.
Yeah, it's just, even that's okay, because again, you can't take away the journey, you can't take away the learning, because I went through a lot of stuff, and looking back, sure, a lot of it was painful, but it made me who I am today, and I think that's also what I hear from a lot of pet parents is like, they may still feel bad about what happened, with their animals, and still feel guilt and judgment and such, but they did, I don't want to use the word better because that's a judgment again, but they did differently for the next one based on that original experience that they had.
Yeah.
And that's the amazing part, and that's what life is about, is about growing.
Exactly.
With things, because we all made mistakes, which we just experimented, and then we figured out, well, that didn't work. So
we'll do that again.
Like kids, they fall. As they learn to grow, they're not judging themselves. Oh crap, I fell again. What's wrong with me? They get up and try it a little differently unconsciously, and all of a sudden they can do it. And I think we kind of need to have a little bit of that childlike attitude again. But the thing is, in life, we get told so many times, you're not loved, you're not good enough, you're not this enough. I mean, everybody has that. And then we just manifest that in different ways in our lives. And getting back to love, I think, is really important, and kindness. And I'm talking to myself right now because I need to hear, I need to hear that all the time. I'm always good at telling other people, and then I go back in my corner and go like, so anyways, but I think that's also where we're going as a whole collective, because we have created a bit of we've done this experiment of working from the survival instinct, from polluting, from doing things that is just benefiting us individually rather than thinking globally as well. And now we have to move into more of like working as a community, working from a place of love, working from a place of respect. So we're in a big shift right now, and anybody who's in that shift and working towards making things better, and even those who are leaving, it's like, it's just incredible to witness.
It is
challenging for sure. My heart goes out to everybody who's suffering, but try to kind of take a step back, and I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing what's happening right now.
It really is. I totally agree with you. We have a couple other good questions over here. Lindsay says, how often would you recommend a fecal transplant?
Well, that very much depends on the animal and the environment, what they eat, what their kind of, what their issues are. Some animals, they may need one, and then that's it, and they're good. But I just started actually adding microbiome tests as a yearly thing in my practice, just to see where they're at, because it can change so quickly,
So how long would you wait, like a 30-day period to retest after you do one, or do you wait 2 weeks and retest to see?
Usually 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
Yeah. That's kind of based on the recommendations from Animal Biome. Because we've done some checking, just to, apparently 2 weeks is enough to see if, how the microbiome has responded, and then once they're off of it, how well they can maintain it, I guess.
Right. And then if they're not maintaining it, how soon again would you do another one?
Right away.
Right away.
Pretty
Okay.
much. Yeah.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, good to know. Lindsay, that might be an option. I know you've thought about it. And then Delph says, how helpful are HEPA filter air purifiers for the home?
I have to admit that I haven't really looked into air purifiers quite as much. But I know there's a lot of information out there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm not that helpful with that right now. But I know there are different systems. There are systems that pull things out, and I guess, I mean, there are little machines that you can just use for one room. There are some that will do the whole house.
Yeah, you can. There are really high quality filters that you can put into your main HVAC.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can also use individual room. I have both. For the room filters and even for the other filters, it's really about how often you have to really monitor how often you have to change those filters. If you forget about it and just let it run and run and run and run for months, it's not really going to do any good. So it's really about monitoring and keeping them clean, changing them out. But I've heard that I've used one for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
It does help. I heard somewhere, don't know what the can't tell you where I heard this from, but they say that indoor air quality is much more toxic than outdoor air quality.
Yeah.
So it is a good idea to have some kind of a purification system or HEPA filter device somewhere in your home to help manage some of that.
Yeah, and then you probably also need to just research what are you trying to filter out, because just like with water, for example, certain filters will filter out fluoride and most carbon filters don't. So it depends a little bit on what you're trying to filter out. So I think the more diverse your filtration system is, the more it will take out just about anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is true. There was another question over here. Someone asked, are oil diffusers dangerous to use when you have a cat? I think you mean essential oil diffusers.
Oh, okay.
I think that's what they went.
Well, I mean, with diffusers, obviously the diffuser itself is not dangerous in that sense, but it depends on what you're diffusing. So if you're using a poor quality essential oil, definitely that's not ideal. All of these little plug-in lamp things, the Glade plugins and the scented candles and all of that are not ideal. I personally don't do a lot of diffusing in my house just because I don't like all of these smells. I much rather have like a scentless air. And given that cats have a lot more nose, they have a much better nose than we do. I always wonder, well, how do they feel if we diffuse lavender and all sorts of other things? Because for them, if I think it stinks, then what about them? So I guess if you're diffusing things, make sure you have really, really good quality essential oil and use it sparingly, because what you smell or what you may not smell, they may still smell. And maybe also have a space where it doesn't smell at all so that they could also go there, to get away from it.
Yep. And then Delph also says, how do you detox a cat?
Yeah.
I have thoughts on that, but I want to hear what you have to say.
That's a good question. Well, with cats, I tend to use a little bit more of the homeopathic concoctions. There are different companies that make like blends, detox blends from homeopathic remedies, because they don't taste like anything generally, or even if they have a little bit of alcohol in it, if you take it out and let it evaporate, the taste goes away. So that's certainly one way that I will do that. You can also, I mean, if you have a cat that eats well and all of that, you can certainly also put herbs in it. You just have to kind of see. I mean, there are a lot of herbs that are good. If you can give your cat capsules, then or pills, and they let you pill them easily, then you get them down the hatch that way. I guess the less they taste, the better. Theoretically, you can also do it rectally. So if you have just a tiny little tube, you could also inject detox supplements rectally, because that gets absorbed into the blood circulation, and everything from the gastrointestinal tract goes directly into the liver first before it goes anywhere else, because all blood from the gastrointestinal tract goes through the liver. So those are definitely different ways.
And how often would you recommend, like, just for example, for liver support and chemical detox and things like that, how often would you recommend someone do that for their pets a year?
Well, I definitely tend to focus a little bit more heavily on detox during the times of year where the body naturally detoxes more, which is in the spring and the fall. So when the change of season happens, so during those times, certainly, and then just on a ongoing basis a little bit, just by providing them a good diet. And if you have a cat who will eat a little bit of vegetables or something, making a little bit of a smoothie and adding a little bit that way, adding a little bit of green powders, adding a little bit of chlorella, things like that, on a regular basis, because detoxification is not a one-time thing.
Right.
It's really ongoing, because we're exposed to toxins ongoingly.
Totally agree with you. Yeah.
And then, if you have any other tips.
Well, I was just I've learned a lot from working with naturopaths for myself over the years. And a lot of times when I'm working with cats, I'll kind of do the same approach as far as testing. So when I'll muscle test, if they definitely have some stagnation and need some detoxing and things, I always test to see if the lymphatic support needs done by itself first. Because if the drainage pathways are not open in the body, then the toxins are just going to recycle and recirculate, and they're going to have very unhappy pets and have more miserable experiences and, things like that. So sometimes I'll start with just lymphatic support first, and then we'll move to liver, and then intestinal. I do not do everything at the same time. I have the body do one thing at a time. So I wouldn't do like a intestinal and a liver and a parasite all at the same time, for example. I would space those out a little bit so that it's not overwhelming.
Yeah, definitely. And again, the foundation is important.
Yes.
Again, it opens up the detox pathways by providing, the nutrients that are necessary to process the toxins through the liver.
Yeah. Because if your liver's not working, your detox is not going to be very effective. So we want to make sure the liver's happy.
Exactly. And I also like to add binders. Again, if the cat will take them, because, you put something in their food, they're like, yeah, you messed with my food, I'm not eating that. But binders, because they also help to shuttle things out. Because again, once things are in the gastrointestinal tract, we want to make sure that they actually leave. So if you have a cat that's constipated, then you need to fix the constipation issue first, before you even do any sort of added detox, because otherwise it's just going to, as you said, being recycled, toxins getting recycled, which that's not helpful.
No. And if you think about it, for people who are constipated, if you're not pooping every day, your body is constipated. I'm sorry, because your body is just all of the waste and the water and the toxins are sitting in your colon. If they are not going out of your body, they are being reabsorbed into your tissues, and that, my friend, is gross, and it makes for a very unhealthy body. So,
you have to open the poop chute, as Dr. D. Blanco calls it, the poop chute.
You got to. And that's one of your major organs. Does anybody else have any other questions? This has been so fun and so informative. So we will be wrapping up here in a second. But any final thoughts, Dr. Suter, just before we go?
Well, be kind to yourself. Do the best that you can. Understand that you're on a learning journey, and no matter what happens, it's not wrong. It just is what is, and it will propel you to learn more, grow, etc. Make sure you connect with your animals, that you really drop in to your heart, no matter how sick they are. Don't just focus on their sickness. Focus on your relationship, and have some fun, you know. And then apply the 7 pillars of health. Make sure you adjust, you know, you do some regular body work, you know. That's part of the nervous system pillar, because again, for detox, for example, if the nervous system is innervating the kidneys and the liver, well, then they can function better too. So just put all the pieces together, because the sum of the whole is greater
than the sum of its parts.
I can never remember that, but anyways, that.
Yes.
True. Because they all potentiate each other, so it's really important to put all of the pieces together and not just piecemeal it. Because don't do what I did. I mean, it was my learning lesson, but I'm sharing it because I want to give people a shortcut. And how they, you know, the way they say it is like, you know, you have the teacher, and then the students will surpass the teacher because they stand on the shoulders of the teacher, and then they can take it from there. So, you know, learn from anyone and anybody that you can find. You know, obviously, Pam, you're doing a lot of teaching, and there are so many other people as well who teach. So take advantage of it, you know, and take advantage of the good, you know, the people who have good information. I do see a lot of people on Facebook, and everybody is giving some kind of advice, and I'm like, oh my God. So invest in your animals that way. And of course, everybody is free to piecemeal things together if they feel like that's their journey. But there's so much information out there and so much help, where if you do invest a little bit of money, you can actually get a bit of a shortcut and together, because there's so much information out there, so many rabbit holes that are really interesting going down. But we have to also kind of keep the eye on the price, basically, which is the foundational part, and not, because otherwise, we may be wasting a little bit of time.
Well, this has been so awesome. I want you to know how much we appreciate you and your time. I think we had a lot of great comments over here, and a lot of great information. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. Everybody, thank you for joining us today, and come back again. We'll be doing some more lives in the future, I'm certain. And until then, have a great weekend. And thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was really wonderful, and awesome people too. Great questions. Thank you so much for having me. It's just an honor to always talk to people, because they're the ones who, you know, pet parents, you guys are the ones who are making the change. We're just talking.
Right.
So well, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, you guys, we'll talk to you next time. Have a great weekend.
Bye.
Bye-bye.